So in a sweeping move, Donald Trump has imposed 25% tariffs on goods coming from Canada, except for energy, which only received a 10% tariff. Meanwhile, Mexico also received a 25% tariff, and China received a 10% tariff, which is 15% less than Canada. And this is weird to me because throughout the whole campaign, we were told about how awful China is, and yet Canada is being punished more than China. The executive order that was released claims that these tariffs are in response to illegal immigration and the flow of fentanyl coming out of Canada. So of course I started looking at the statistics for illegal immigration and fentanyl coming out of Canada, and I learned that less than 10% of illegal immigration into the United States comes from Canada, and only 0.01% of all fentanyl trafficked into the United States comes from Canada. Canada is not even in the top 3 countries that ship fentanyl to the United States. These would be China, Mexico, and India, and yet India did not receive any tariffs. And when you look at illegal immigration, Canada isn't even in the top 10. In fact, the primary sources of illegal immigration to the U.S. are Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and India. 4 of those countries had no tariffs imposed upon them. Guatemala has 7 times more illegal immigration than Canada. India has twice as much illegal immigration into the United States and also sends more fentanyl to the U.S., yet they did not receive any tariffs. Even if it was about trade imbalances, the United States has a larger trade deficit with India than Canada. Editing side note here, I'm not advocating for India to have tariffs imposed upon them. I'm just saying it doesn't make any sense why Canada did and India did not. So I'm not sure what we're doing with regard to Canada because it doesn't make any sense, and honestly it's going to hurt Americans. 85% of our potash comes from Canada. We cannot grow crops without potash. And people are saying, well, we can just get it from Australia or Chile. Oh yeah? So let's pay 35% more for potash because of logistics and transportation costs instead of using our neighbor to the north. I mean, you flat out can't grow corn without potash. Canada accounts for 64% of U.S. crude imports and 98% of natural gas imports. Canada actually exports electricity to the United States. New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Washington, and Oregon all benefit from Canadian power. Granted, it's not much relative to the total U.S. energy production, but it still becomes problematic if that electricity gets shut off for some areas in the United States, and vice versa, as we export electricity to Canada. 80% of our lumber imports come from Canada as well. The U.S. imports nickel, aluminum, and copper from Canada. More than likely, we are going to see increases in transportation costs, energy costs, and farming costs, and all of that means more costs at the grocery store. And Donald Trump has prepared us for that, taking to Truth Social to post the following, quote, "Will there be some pain? Yes, maybe, maybe not, but we will make America great again, and it will all be worth the price that must be paid." I remind you that Trump repeatedly campaigned on bringing prices down for Americans. So when you look at the illegal immigration and fentanyl statistics for Canada, those clearly aren't the issues. And these tariffs are likely going to cause economic problems for Middle America. So what is the real reason behind them? Well, President Trump graciously answered that question for me today when he posted this on Truth Social. Quote, "We pay hundreds of billions of dollars to subsidize Canada." We actually don't, but if he's talking about a trade deficit, then sure, there's a $41 billion trade deficit, but that is not the same thing as a subsidy. He goes on to say, quote, "We don't need anything they have." Again, as I've already said, we actually do. He goes on to say, quote, "We have unlimited energy, should make our own cars, and have more lumber than we can ever use." Notably, Trump leaves potash off the list, and nickel, aluminum, and copper, all very critical imports that come from Canada to the U.S. President Trump then goes on to say, quote, "Without this massive subsidy, Canada ceases to exist as a viable country." Harsh but true. He then goes even further and says, quote, "Canada should become our cherished 51st state, much lower taxes and far better military protection for the people of Canada." And then to close out his post in all caps, he exclaims, quote, "And no tariffs." So there you have it, folks. We now know the real reason for these moves by Trump. Take from that what you will.